So I want to start off with a story about a conversation I had with my now 35-year-old son back when he was about 16 or 17 years old. And he said to me one day, "Dad, I think what I really want to do is I want to be a performing musician." And I would love to tell you that the first thing that occurred to me was, oh, this is fantastic. This is like, he's observed his father and decided that this is wonderful work that he wants to dedicate his life to, and I'm passing on the family business. But I swear to God, what I thought was, no! You have no idea how unlikely this is. All the pieces that had to work together to make this possible. There's all kinds of stuff that happens. I remember the first thing I said, okay, sit down. Watch this. And he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm paying my water bill." What does that have to do with being a performing musician? This is what you do with the money you make from being a performing musician. And if you don't pay your water bill, you will not get an incomplete. They will turn off your water. And not enough musicians learn that if you don't answer your email and you don't show up on time and you don't send the promotional materials that you've promised, and you show up and you're distracted, or you're going through a divorce, or you're drunk, or you're high, or you're hungover, or you're thinking about the fact that there's only 10 people in the audience tonight and what that means financially and psychologically. Not enough people think about that part of their work. So that's what we're going to talk about today, okay? And we're going to end in enough time to have some Q&A, because everybody's got their own little world that they're living in. Tag,
okay. So we're going to divide this into some sections, but that's because we've known each other for over 30 years. We're going to just keep interrupting each other. So we've decided that the first place that this all begins is at your home, or where you're working. And getting your office and your business together before you even book that tour, have your agent book the tour, before you're out on the road, and before you kind of visualize what you want so that you can be like John and be having a sustainable career 45 years later. And some of these tricks I've had to do in the business so I could have a career 45 years later, and we're still going. There's no end in sight. Oh, I'm so sorry. And so the first thing is I want you to think about is validate your work patterns. What John and I are going to try to do is take away the shoulds. I should be a full-time touring musician. I should do it this way. I should travel coast to coast. There are no shoulds here. So
there's many models.
Many models.
Many models.
So the key to sustainability is to validate your own work patterns. Are you a morning person or an evening person? When do you do your clearest thinking? There is no should. I should get up at 9 a.m. Well, if you're a night person, that's going to be tough. So what do you do at night when your thinking is clearer? So, and then also, I don't know if anyone went to the calendaring workshop, but we talked about whether or not you're a visual person or an audio person. And in other words, if you need to see things on paper in front of you, if you have things all over your desk, you're probably a visual person. The way you conduct your business and your office and the cues, the clues and cues that you need are based on being visual and not audio. But if you are audio, you will set up your business and your calendar systems and the way you keep track of things on the road. So if you're taking, if you want to be organized for the road, are you going to keep it all in your calendar, on your phone, or in your computer, or are you going to print out things? Understanding the way that you respond the easiest to a system is going to save you a lot of time and energy for the rest of your life.
Let me insert in here that there was a period of time pre-iPhone. You younger people here, it was horrible. You can't imagine. We actually looked at one another rather than, if aliens landed, Who would be? They all are controlled by. Yeah. What worked for me was to have a printed out calendar, and then I'd have color coded with. I had a bunch of different magic markers, and I had one was this is an area that I'm touring. This is a period of time that I'm touring. This is a period of time I'm absolutely not touring. This is my wife's birthday. This is my kids' blue and gold banquet. This is our summer vacation that we take to the same place the same week every year. And having that visual, colorful thing, it's like the difference between people who can actually use GPSs and people who have to see a map so they know more than the next turn. I had to see my life laid out in a way that gave me hope that I wasn't touring all the time, and that I wouldn't forget when my mother-in-law's 70th birthday was and accidentally book a gig. Or even more importantly, convince myself that this was a really important gig to take. This is going to be a career-defining gig. My chicks, there are very, very few, if any, career-defining gigs. This is folk music we're talking about. This is not American Idol, and let's be grateful for that. So this is what worked for me. And I still do that on my iPhone. I have color-coded dates. You can do that. We'll have a workshop on that after this.
Well, I did it earlier.
Yeah,
it was
good.
on calendaring. It was about color coding. Anyone there? It was about color coding and all of that. And I'll show you this too. Like when you go out on the road, and it starts in your office, this kind of consideration that you're talking about is what do you need to get out on the road and be organized? So if you're at the gig, are you like, oh, where am I staying tonight, right? I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to tap the table. So where am I staying tonight? Or, oh, I forgot what the guarantee was, or I don't have any written thing, and you're going through papers. Well, maybe it's in the trunk. How many of you? Okay, so what you want to do is find the system. So that was John's system. You could do it in your phone, but and I've done a lot of professional tour managing. I've been on the road with Suzanne Vega and Janice Ian, and you work with agents, or you are the agent, depending on what's going on, and you need sheets or ways of getting your information. This is my SERFA tour schedule. These were all the printouts for workshops I needed at the end. I have the start and end time of every workshop. I know what time everything starts. I know what time lunch is. I have different things that I'm doing, and this is the way I respond so that I can be calm. So I just went to England for 3.5 weeks, and I did the same thing. I had everybody's address, everybody's phone number, everything on my tour schedule, because that's the way I go on the road. So you have to figure out your system. While you're at home, the other thing is, and to sustain for 45 years, and just kind of like John was saying, when do you take a break? How hard do you work before you get out on the road? And when you're on the road, that's another thing that I'm sure we'll be talking about. So while you're working at home, and you're going to be doing this for decades, working at home probably, or partially to get your careers, how do you stop burning out? Anyone in this room ever burn out? Yeah. So how do you stop that? Well, you don't work all the time, or you schedule in a lunch, or you schedule in a walk. Or for me, I do radio promotion, and Thursday mornings are the day that email gets finished and goes out to radio. That's very intensive to me, because not only is it a lot of data I've put together, but then I put my heart and soul into writing my marketing piece so it will be interesting and talk about the artist's music. And when I'm done, I'm tired. And I have found that when I was younger, I would force myself to just keep going. Okay, I did that, now what am I going to do? But that's not what I need to do. So I play tricks with myself to be self-employed. And what I'll tend to do is like, okay, Thursdays I block out on my calendar. I don't do any client calls or anything. If someone calls, I set a boundary and I say, I'd love to talk to you about this. Can we wait until this afternoon? I want to get this done. When it is done, I've scheduled in a different activity to get me away from my computer. So again, I want you to think about your work patterns. You are allowed to take breaks. You can change your scenery. I call it change of venue. I've been enough in my office. Now I'm going to go to this room. So that's in taking care of yourself. The last two things I'll say very briefly is I'd like you to think about streamlining your daily routines. So I was sending out mail, and I'd go over here and I'd get the envelope, and then I'd go over here and get the stamps, and I'd go down here and I'd get the address labels, and then I'd go, and I'm thinking, what am I doing to myself? I'm sending out a letter. I just need to take everything and put it here and send it out and not be. So organize your office and your life to streamline your tasks, your daily tasks, because if you have good business practices, then everything else that John and I are going to talk about is going to be easier for you because you're streamlining your work. And the last thing I'm going to talk about in terms of self-employment and keeping your office together in your life is you need to conquer your isolation. So the first step is to acknowledge that you have it and be okay to acknowledge that you have it. And then in your work routine and schedule, or even in your business practice, how do you conquer that isolation? Do you schedule a walk at 4 o'clock? Do you say, I, for instance, do need to work a lot, but Fridays, if I'm going to schedule a lunch date, that's my date. Mondays, I block off my calendar so that I have coffee in the morning with my girlfriends. That's one social event I can count on during the week. And then I don't mind Mondays. I can't wait to see the gals at the coffee shop. And then the rest of the day is errands, catching up on phone calls that didn't happen last week, and not doing task-related things. So whatever it takes, I'd like to encourage you to look at your life. Look at what you can improve at home. Look at what makes work more fun for yourself.
I think that it's important to acknowledge a couple of really important truisms. Number one, we are everybody else's free time. We work on the weekends, we work at night. We are everybody else's target of disposable income. What that means is when, quote, normal people are recreating, we are the subject of their recreation. And what that means, it speaks to the isolation in our everyday work life. And what it also means is you have to put some extra effort into undoing that. You can't, into countering it. You can't undo it. But it's really easy all of a sudden to not get calls anymore from your old friends because you're never available. No, I can't, we have this golf outing we want to go on, or we're going to go to a ball game, or we're just going to go fishing this weekend. Oh, geez, I'm working, I'm on the road. And eventually people stop calling you. Trust me. One of the reasons that makes Kari and I qualified to do this workshop and offer you advice is that we have made every mistake twice.
Oh, 3 times.
Well, she's made them 3 times.
He's made them 4.
I've made them, I'm coachable. And it's one reason that when you go to conferences like this or you go to festivals, that musicians develop these almost feral relationships with one another. Your best friend you've only spent maybe 5 total hours in your entire life with. And that's part of how we develop relationships. And it just is what it is. It doesn't make it any less, I met Cy Khan on a Harlan County picket line on Thanksgiving Day, 1972. And we have never spent more than 3 consecutive days together in 45 years. But we're best friends because we understand, we need these connections with people who don't think we're crazy and who are the only other people in the world that do the work we do, that share the passion, that are willing to put up with the shit that we put up with to do this job. And so we have to seek out those. But you also need your next door neighbor. Because if your house is on fire, you need to know the guy's name, okay? Or vice versa. You need to work overtime to have a life in your neighborhood and your community. And if you haven't figured that out yet, I'm glad I'm telling you. Because you really need to do that. That's part of this isolation. The overall message I want to bring you is you have to be as creative in your job as you are in your work. Because it changes all the time. When I was 20 years old and going out and doing 225 gigs a year, because I could, and no was not in my vocabulary, and I didn't want to do anything but play music 24 hours a day, that was one thing. Then you meet somebody, and you have a relationship, and you have to change. And then maybe you get married, and you have to change even more. And then maybe you have kids, and you really have to change. The most important thing that happened to me in my professional life was I became a father. And I had to figure out how to be a father and how to tour. I all of a sudden bagged extended tours. I decided that what my kids needed after living with them for a couple of years was they needed me in there. There is no such thing as quality time. That is a myth that yuppies invented to be able to spend more time working. Kids only care about quantity. And I'm sorry, it's an inconvenient truth, but it's an absolute fact. So in my case, I had to say, okay, I'm only going to tour on the weekends. I'm going to fly out to a place, rent a car, go boom, boom, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, home. And I do one tour in California for like 2 weeks every year, but that's it. I dropped all my international tours. Once every 3 years, I go to Australia. But other than that, I was trying to find ways to take my kids with me and expose them to the stuff that, because it was important for them to know that the work that Dad did was good work and important work, and Dad loved his work. And they needed to see that, and they needed to see people. It's why my son at 17 said, that's what I want to do. But all the pieces that have to be able to work, maybe you don't work well with touring, you know? Maybe you don't sleep well except in your own bed. Maybe you go out on the road and you get sick. I know people like this. I know touring musicians, it's the last thing they should be doing, because they don't work well on the road. Maybe you don't like being around big crowds of people. Or maybe you like being around big crowds of people too much. You know, I've always said that anybody who doesn't know how to get a standing ovation should not be in this trade. And anyone who needs a standing ovation should not be in this trade. Because the other truism you need to know is you have the greatest job in the world. Can anyone name another job in which you get affirmed every 5 minutes by strangers? I mean, think about that, truly. Truly. I mean, that's a really important thing to deal with. How many of you sort of had to think, I gotta figure out where to put this? You know? What are they really saying to me? And when the opposite happens, when there's only 10 people there, and I didn't make the money I was hoping I was going to make, and I didn't sell any product, and gosh, maybe nobody likes me, and I have to be away from, this is a wasted night away from home, and sure, I'll have another beer, and she's got a nice smile, and sure, I'll try a line of that. And that's an old, really common story. You've got the upside and the downside, and you have to figure out where to put that. And that's a really important piece of surviving the long haul.
And what John said about, we're talking about the affirmation, and he said if you can't get a standing ovation, you shouldn't be in this business. And if you need that standing ovation, you shouldn't be in this business. One thing that can really trip you up, if you don't have your own confidence before you step on that stage, you cannot step on the stage hoping to get your confidence. You have to know who you are and what you're bringing to the table before you step on the stage, because you might be opening for the person with orange hair. You're obviously in the wrong venue.
Donald Trump?
Sorry, everybody. Didn't mean to go there. But you have to know, because you will be standing on stage and people may not get you at all. That's not you. That's you being in front of the wrong audience. I once, it was Susie Boggess, right? She had a gig in the Midwest, and I was friends with her and her musical partner. And they were in a Midwest bar, and there was people screaming and yelling and throwing beers. And then they go, "Kari, you want to play now?" And I'm like, "Sure." And I got up there, and I didn't need anyone's affirmation. They were all having a party. They didn't care about me. But my friends were in the audience, and I got up there and I played, and I had a blast. I didn't need anyone to tell me whether I was good or not. That's not why I got up on stage. I just got up on stage to, this is kind of a party, and it's, stuff is flying, and that's kind of exciting, and I'll just go sing, and I don't need that affirmation. So that's very important. Back to you, Tom. John. No, I was just teasing.
You've been in the business too long. And so how do you set up relationships that matter? As we are in a really anomalous part of the music business. And make no bone, don't have any illusions. This really is a business. And the business is run by business people. The music business is not run by artists, and art is not their goal. Their goal is profits. And they maximize that by maximizing competition. And as much as we are cooperative, the fact that we have this conference this is not a typical trade show. This is a trade, yes, it's a trade show, but it's also a family reunion and a gathering of the tribe and a really desperate audition. We have, let's be honest, people, I can read the walls. How do we have a responsibility to one another in this trade? How many of you have had someone come up to you after your gig and say, "I didn't know I liked folk music"? You were someone's entree into a world of music that you have dedicated your life to. If that's not success, that's better than any Grammy any of you will ever not get. He said jadedly. I'm a 6-time Grammy loser. And so how you conduct yourself both artistically and professionally reflects on everybody else, all of your comrades who mount that stage before and after you. So, I've spent 45 years being incredibly grateful that I can get away with this. And one of the things about being grateful is thanking people. It's shocking to me how many times at the end of a night I will go with my little cheat sheet in front of me, going through the names of the sound person and the light person and the stage manager and the promoter and the DJs who help promote the show, and the sound person will come up to me afterwards and say, "No one has ever done that for me before." And my first thought is, who are these people? Who are their mothers that didn't teach them that you say thank you to the people who let you get affirmed every 5 minutes? Without them, your job doesn't happen. This is a cooperative effort. And so the opposite is true too. When you work for a promoter that stiffs you or treats you badly, You let everybody know. This is how we survive. Don't play for that person. They're gonna say they're gonna pay you, but they're not gonna do it. And likewise, this is a great gig. You know who would be good here? You're talking to the promoter now. You know who would be perfect for this audience is my buddy Cy Khan. This is how you seed the bed for your community. And this is also by way of saying you need to join the union. Local 1000 of the American Federation of Musicians. We started it for us. If you don't know about it, talk to John O'Connor, who is here, the very first president. I was president for 15 years. Deb Cowan, who was the vice president for a long time. Scott Berwick, who is the immediately retired secretary treasurer. It's the only, if you were a doctor, the first thing you would do out of medical school is join the American Medical Association. If you were a dentist, if you were a lawyer, you'd know what organization you would join. There is no other organization whose sole purpose, it's not Folk Alliance, it's not many other organizations, the only organization whose sole purpose is to advocate for musicians and musicians' rights and interests is the American Federation of Musicians. That's the end of my ad. But it's an important part of creating a sustainable future. I'm just about to retire with a union pension. The union financed my house. When I was sick a year ago, they provided disability insurance. They were an avenue for health insurance before the ACA came along, and they may be again. So there's all kinds of ways in which you can, there are pocketbook issues and there are solidarity issues, and both should be important to you. Because otherwise, you're just one schmo out there doing one gig on one night, and you're all alone. And it feeds that isolation that we've been talking about.
Well, and this does segue nicely into the touring aspect. That's the second piece of this puzzle for sustainability, is the touring aspect. And first of all, how many of you do have agents? So you're all booking your own. I know you do. That's great. And one day maybe you will have an agent, or you will train someone to have an agent, or a fan will come up to you and say, "Oh my gosh, I love your music. I'd love to work with you." And you might have that opportunity. So right now I'll direct this to those of us who book our own tours or serve in that capacity to help someone to book a tour. Before you get out on the road, you have to know what you want to do. So back in the day when John was in his 20s, as he said, he just wanted to eat up the road. He wanted to play music 24/7. I don't see too many 20-year-olds in this room. So this may not be your same motivation. And the first thing in looking at touring is taking away the shoulds. I should tour all the time, or I won't be a real sustainable artist. You can have a day job. You can go out on the weekends. But the thing is, before you start to book your tours, you have to decide what it is you want out of touring. You can sell more CDs on the road because you're not going to sell them any other way. That's for sure. And this is still, in the acoustic music world, CDs are still the way to go. It may not be that way in other genres, but we're still hanging in there like grim death for that. So you do want to get out on the road. But you get to decide, like, you may have a family, or you may be in your 50s. You may have a good job. You may have a business consulting job. I just got a new client, and she's a safety aeronautics consultant. That's how she makes her money. Someone else could be a bookkeeper. So know what you want from going out on the road and what is sustainable for you. Just like John mentioned, you know, his life changed from being a young guy who could just have it all to falling in love and having a kid. And the other thing too is, as the decades go in our lives, what interests you may change. It's always shocking to get to that place, but what interests you may change. And you have to be able to adapt to that and get rid of the shoulds. So now you want to go out on the road. The other thing is to know what you need out on the road. Do you want to do, like if I'm working with a band that I was booking in the day, I would know how many days in a row can they play. Some people will say, I want to do 10. I don't recommend it, but some people want to do 10. Maybe some people do 3 or 4 with a day off. Some people do 7 to 10. You need to know what you need to do on the road. How many hours do you drive after a gig? Do you stay in the same place beyond a certain amount of time? All these things are keep you sustainable to put your lifestyle into your touring style. How many hours do you drive in between gigs that you'll be able to play? Some people can't do more than 4 to 5. Some people will go up to 8 or 9. But that may not be you, and that may not be you. So when you're looking at your tour routing, you have to know what's sustainable for you. Likewise, if you book your tours far enough in advance, you're going to be much better off. We all know house concerts themselves are booked 6 months to a year to 2 years ahead. Venues can be booked 3 months to 6 months ahead. So I had an artist I was working with, and he had a tour in 2 months. And every day he's on the phone trying to get those gigs. But he just had a great anchor date in July. And then he's planning something in September. And I said, cut your losses on the 2 months away. You're spinning your wheels. Everyone's rejecting you. No, we're booked. So that didn't make sense. I said, why don't you take this effort and go and book July and then start on your September tour, and let's work forward so that you get more result from the time that you're putting in. And the other thing, and I don't know, I don't think I've heard anyone else say this, but I say this to everyone, don't book one tour at a time. Don't let anyone get off the phone because they're booked and not pencil in another date if at all humanly possible. I was booking someone overseas, so it made more sense for me to do that. But I had a little grid. I had talked to people, and I had kind of what I thought would be a good way to route this tour. And then that's my ideal routing, and then I deal with what happens. And I don't want the artist, and I hope you don't want to go here, and then here, and then here, and then here, because that's what comes up. You have more control over that. And so I was trying to put something together in a normal amount of time, and someone would invariably say, well, I'm booked. And I'm like, really? Well, when does your schedule free? You know, I like them, but I'm booked. I'm like, well, when does your schedule free up? Well, we're going to have something starting in the spring. And I'm like, are you ready to take a look? And maybe we'll just pencil something in. And then I'll come back and confirm. So in one phone call, I've got a result. So don't leave a gig on the table by saying, oh, I'll call you then. Pencil something in if that person is able to do that. And then you have to look at your touring style. Some of us have slept on a lot of floors in our time, or some pretty saggy beds, or couches, and we've had hosts that are very sweet to us, but it's very unsustainable because you have to get up the next day and you've got to practice for something or whatever. So you have to know what you need out of being on the road. Do you need to get a cheap hotel? Do you need to book an Airbnb, which is now an option that we didn't have back in the day? Is it okay to stay with a host? Are you all right with sleeping on the floor? Is the couch okay with you?
How comfortable is your car?
Or your cat, as the case may be. So you want to try to figure those things out for you. And another thing, and I think, John, you might have touched on this, is boundaries. It's okay to set boundaries for yourself, for people you work with, and for what you expect. So obviously, if you're staying at a host home, part of the reason they want to have you is because they like to do something nice for you, and they want to have an association with you. And let's say someone's going to put you up and you really need 2 hours on the phone before you leave in the morning, and you have to kind of get to bed. So when you walk in the door, you say to this host, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much. I'm going to really enjoy having dinner. I just need to let you know, unfortunately, I'd love to stay up and party a bit more tonight, but I have to get on my computer from 9 to 11 tomorrow. But if you're around then, let's have a cup of coffee before I shove off. Because you've let that host know what your expectation level is, and yet you honor that person wants to spend a little time with you. Setting boundaries is important. And keeping your attitude in the car or in the van and not on stage. And this is what, John has a great attitude. He is a pro. He gets on stage and he has learned everybody's name and he knows who to thank. And it really feels great when you've done sound or you're one of the waitresses and you're trying to get your tips to have your name called out. It really is important to be grateful to people. And if the sound person, and we all can get a little testy with those sound people, and there's some that genuinely don't care. But you're in front of an audience. You can't start arguing with a sound person on stage. That's being a professional. So keep your attitude together, but be sure you set your boundaries of what you need. And don't take it all personally. That sound person may be a jerk, or maybe they've had a hard day. Maybe they need a little extra kindness. So you just have to check in with all of that. So these are just some tips for knowing what you need on the road. And lastly, but certainly not least, is in terms of your own health. Do you have the food you need on the road for the car to take into the home with you? Do you have your vitamins? Do you have anything special dietary? Like I can be gluten intolerant, although I did try the brownies today, but I just had a little bit. And sometimes lunches can be too heavy. And so I have a sustainable cracker with me that it's nuts and seeds, and I was hungry after lunch yesterday because I wasn't going to eat the baked potato, but I can take care of myself instead of complaining that I didn't get what I needed. So make sure that when you go on the road, if you need to take a favorite Bucky, a buckwheat thing, a pillow with you, or if you need to take something that makes your life happier. It could be anything as insignificant. For me, it would be a hand cream. I love hand cream. It's a crazy little thing, but it makes me so happy to have it with me, because when I'm washing my hands all the time, they get dry. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter how insignificant it is, but take something that makes you feel calm and comfortable, that addresses your health and dietary and possibly your sleep needs.
So let's take it step by step on what I did. I created a sheet with all the information that I needed to know for a gig. What the person's name was, their address, phone number, day of show phone number. It's almost all mobile numbers now, so it's all the same, but it's not always that. What's their email? Do you text? Because if I'm running late, if there's an accident on I-85 and I'm going to be late, I want to be able to tell somebody. Who is the sound person? Can I get a hold of the sound person? Is there a local radio station that plays music like you're presenting? Is there somebody from the local press that usually... This is if you're doing everything on your own. Then you take that with you and you reference it. Where am I staying? And again, when I started doing this was pre-cell phone. Now, my wife can get a hold of me anytime, anywhere. But in the old days, it was like, what was everything from what's the name of the hotel, what's the number for the hotel, what is the internet access dial-up number for the hotel, all this kind of stuff, which has obviously changed over time, but some things have not changed.
And let me just throw in one thing. What time zone are you going to be in?
And if you play in Indiana, it's never entirely clear.
Or Tennessee.
But what's going to make your life so much easier is contact the promoter and the sound person before you get there. It's what's called advancing the job. I'm sure I'm not telling a lot of you people anything that you don't know. So that if you need, and this is exclusive of the contract writer, that you have to have, even if it's just a checklist. So how else are they going to know that you need a direct box? If you like a particular, if your voice sounds really good on a Shure Beta 87, buy one. Take it with you. If you want a direct box, if you want a boom stand, take an extra extension with you. Prepare for the worst. Expect the best, but prepare for the worst. Learn about sound. You all probably are astonished at how much you have learned about sound and acoustics, because That's how you establish a relationship with the sound person. Because many of them think you're an idiot. And if you can say, here's what I like in my monitor. Do they know you need a monitor? That's what the rider is for. Do they know you'd like to have, that you don't want to be in the broom closet, you'd actually like to have a backstage room with access to a bathroom, and the room needs to be lockable? How else are they going to know that? When I first did my first contract writer, I was scared to death they were going to think I was a prima donna. And without exception, people said to me, thank you so much. How else would we, this served like a checklist for us. Oh, you don't want nuts in the dressing room? You don't want, you want half and half for your, instead of cremor? We wouldn't have known. Thank you for telling us. You do not want to stay at the house where the after party is.
Yeah.
That's in there. You don't want people recording your concert. That's in there. I found it was a checklist from all the mistakes I made and all the experiences that I had. Every one of you is going to have a different thing, and it makes your life so easy. And then you call them beforehand. You say, did you get the contract? Did you get the stage diagram? Do you have a stage diagram? You will now. Did you check the writer? Any questions? Any questions? My road manager is allergic to green peppers. How would they know? And without that information, he doesn't get to eat.
And let me clarify the advancing, because if you have a tour manager, the tour manager will do that. But if you're doing that, it has changed. Invariably, when you send your sound diagram to the venue, the venue will assume that it's not current and forget about it, and the sound man or sound woman will never see it. And then you just have to assume that. And if you talk to the venue themselves, you also have to assume the information isn't getting there, and the sound person will have no idea what you're about when you get there.
Which is why you need to talk to the sound person yourself.
So usually in more of the soft seater rooms, but if lighting is not usually something that you have to deal with because you're one person on the stage or just a few. But if I'm advancing for a tour, I advance with a club owner. I do just what John says. I get day of show information. I get cell phone numbers for the manager on duty that day. I always want to know who's going to pay us. It's very important. But I also want to make sure I know what sound person is scheduled for that day, make direct contact, and go over the writer with them. And then they're not going to always provide you with what you say you need. And it's okay. They can cross out things and talk to you about it, but talk to the people directly and don't assume anything. And if you play B.B. King's in New York, not only are you talking to the venue, but you're talking to the manager of the day, you're talking to the sound person, you're talking to the lighting person, and then you're talking to the hospitality person. With your writer and your sound, make sure it's very clear that they understand what you need. They may substitute, and make sure you talk to the person as much as you can who will be doing your sound that evening.
And lighting is the forgotten art in concert production. And it makes a huge difference. In my case, I play a hammer dulcimer, which needs light. I can't play it in the dark, unfortunately. So I have to let them know. It's the only thing that I'm not touching with my hands. Everything else I can play blindfolded. So they need to know that I need a light going down. And if you end up being the person who shows up saying, oh, and by the way, I need this, and they've had no idea, you're a pain in the ass to them. So respect their job. The sound person, the light person, they're the people that are making your show seeable and hearable to the people. It doesn't matter how good you are if people can't hear you. And if you have a very particular way you like to sound, bring your own vocal mic. Have a little stage setup that can. I have a thing now that I set up and I say, because it was designed for festivals where you have no sound check. So I can go into a place if need be and say, set it flat and don't touch it. And I control everything up here. And that's years of experimenting. But if that's the kind of, if that's your bugaboo, you need to provide that on your own. Okay? Sound checks. Show up in plenty of time. Not before the show, before they open the doors, which are two different things, as you know. How much time do you need? Build in an extra half hour, because something is going to go wrong.
So let's go over that for your sound check, for your advance sheet. I think each of you should think about making up your own advance sheet that you use every time. One of the things that I always ask, the first thing is, what time is load in? Then what time is sound check? How long do I have for sound check? When do the doors open? What time do I hit the stage? Is there someone on before or after me? These are very important points. Also, I have merchandise. Do you sell? Do I sell? Where do I sell?
Do you take a percentage? Do I need a cash bank to start off with? Do you have Wi-Fi? Can I take credit cards? Square, 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 or PayPal. Whichever. You're gonna, you know, when I started taking credit cards at my shows, my sales increased by 40% on the first day. How many of you carry enough cash to buy a CD? Square, Square.
You also want to ask about meals if they're provided. You have to understand if you can eat an hour before a show. So when you're looking at your load-ins and sound check and your stage time and the length of your set, and if it's 1 or 2 sets, you also have to know when you're going to eat. And you have to know what's okay for you. Some people don't eat till after the show. Will the kitchen be closed? That kind of thing. All of those things are very important details that can stress you out and make your 45 years seem like 80. Or you might not get to those 45. The other thing, too, is when you're planning your tours, when are you doing your laundry? There was a bar in Minneapolis that was a laundry bar. Every time we had a gig in that town, we were rooting about that. You know, it's like, oh, okay, we're going to play the gig, and then the next morning we're going to the bar and we're doing our laundry.
Well, it'll tell you how to pack for your tour.
It will.
How many pair of underwear are you going to take? You know? I mean, this is important stuff.
This is literally called getting down to basics.
Y'all have to understand, being on the road is easy. It's really easy. Being home is hard. Your only job on the road is to get to the gig. That's your only job. You don't have to clean up your dog's poop. You don't have to strip the beds. You don't have to go out and weed in the garden. You don't have to go to the PTA meeting. You don't, have to go to the Kiwanis Club. You don't have to go to church prayer services. Being on the road is easy. But you need to know that the gig starts the minute you walk in the door of the venue. You are on. Until you bid the last person adieu that night, and it might be in their home. So understand that your performance begins the minute you walk in.
And just to pick up on what you just mentioned about not stripping the beds and picking up the poo, if you are living with someone, that's what they're doing. And when you get home from a tour, this is for sustaining a relationship when you're on the road. When you walk in the door, they don't really care how tired you are because they've just been walking the dog, taking the kids to school, fixing the roof that just leaked. And when you walk in the door, you've also got to be, and you could probably talk about that, John, but what I'm going to suggest, because I'm sure you do that with your...
Oh, of course.
Your partner. You see, look, he has a look of recognition there. But if you are tired, if you know that you're tired after your tour and you're really grumpy, what I would rather suggest you think about negotiating is that the day after your tour, that you book that day to go through your finances before you walk in the door. But what that really is a little time to rest and downtime before you walk in the door. Because the first thing you do when you walk in the door is, hey, I'm home, what can I do? Because you've been
It's
on
not the
stage.
first thing I do when I walk in the door. As Jack Tottle used to say, you come home from tour, you walk in the door, you make love to your wife, then you put your bags down.
I'll take it from you. Right, that is better advice. But the point is the same. You have to give your significant other full attention and be willing, and whatever that need is for your significant partner, because you've been the one on stage.
And that has to go on throughout the entire tour. Because touring is simple, but it's really artificial. I mean, nobody else does this kind of thing, where they all of a sudden go off and they do these public things where they get all this affirmation and then they go home. What makes it work for you? Do you do yoga? Why should you stop when you go on the road? Do you regularly engage in some kind of spiritual or religious activity? Would you feel weird if you got up someplace on a Sunday morning and you didn't go to Mass, for instance? Do you exercise regularly? Do you relax by reading a book? Do you read to your kids at night? There's no reason that you can't do that while you're on the road. All those things that help you maintain a sense of normalcy in your life shouldn't stop when you go on the road. In fact, you should redouble your efforts. Do you at 5 o'clock every night, do you have a cocktail? And then do you sit down and write? Those activities that can make you feel less like you're a part of this little bubble out there. You should call home every day, at least once. And there's all kinds of things that you can do. There's Skype, there's FaceTime. Now there's all, just call. I'll read something in the Writer's Almanac. I mean, I have poetry waiting in my email box every morning. It's fantastic. Do you know about the Writer's Almanac? It's not just Garrison Keillor droning on the radio. You can actually get this stuff in your mailbox. And I wake up in the morning and the first thing I have is a beautiful poem. And sometimes I'll be someplace and I'll call home and say, honey, listen to this. So that you're not just, because they don't know what you're doing out there. Believe me, they don't know what you're doing.
Well, John, why don't we, so we have time for questions. We have about 20 some minutes left, very, very briefly. Why don't we talk, going back to what we were saying. So you've organized your office, you kind of know how you want to do things, and you're out on the road, and you're doing this for years and years and years. But you need to sustain a career. So what we'll briefly talk about is what you want to do to keep in the music business, or to keep earning money at music. To stay true to this, we're both going to be working for years and years and years, and we've already put in our 45 years, and we're still going strong. The reason we're doing it is because we've changed what matters to us. We've changed our goals. So do you want to talk about that as an artist?
I'm just about to go off to a songwriting camp that I run every year. And the thing that anybody who's ever been to any of my songwriting workshops will say, what is the mantra? Think backwards. Think what you want to accomplish at the end of all this. And that's something I would say, if you're putting a set together, where do you want to be at the end of that set? What kind of a ride have you taken your audience on that night? Think backwards. What do you want to say at the end of this song you're writing? Think backwards. And then plot your course there. And it's the same thing is true with my career, if that's what this is. Whether you're doing a gig or you're planning a career, flexibility is one of the things that is really important. If they don't have a Shure Beta 87, but they had a 58, I prefer that. Okay, okay, I'll fight my battles another day. So I have probably reinvented myself 5 or 6 times over the course of this last 45 years. And it's been the process of learning about the music, learning about myself, learning about where the vacuum was in the trade. I started off as playing almost entirely traditional music. I was 20 years old, and I was collecting music every waking hour, visiting old people who played, and I would learn their music, and that's what I did exclusively. And I also called square dances. In fact, my first gigs were I would do an hour-long concert, and then they'd push back the chairs, and I'd call a dance. And that lasted until my voice gave out. And then I had to decide which way did I want to go. I loved doing both things. And then I realized, oh, there's this guy, Sai Khan, who's writing really great songs. And so I was the first person to go around sing Sai Khan songs, other than Sai Khan. And so I started exploring people who were writing material. And then it was Hazel Dickens and Gene Ritchie and all these people. And then I started writing my own stuff. And then I started getting involved, and so John McCutcheon's singer-songwriter all of a sudden started to happen. And it was very organic. And then I got involved in some more political work. And then I had children. And oh, I'm in this really pregnant, pardon the pun, atmosphere, the most evocative atmosphere I've ever been in, 24 hours a day. And so I did 8 albums of songs about my kids and their friends growing up. And then my kids were grown up, and I'd said everything I wanted to say, and I was on to something else. And then all of a sudden I woke up one day and I was an elder. And I thought, okay, it's Woody Guthrie's 100th birthday. First 50 songs I learned were Woody Guthrie songs. In honor of his 100th birthday, I'm not going to do my own songs. I'm going to do a whole album of Woody Guthrie songs. And then it's the 100th anniversary of Joe Hill's death. Who else is going to do it? I'll do that. And so it enabled me to have a lot of freedom to say, this is what I'm interested in right now. I'm going to go there. And so you don't have to be the same thing your entire career. You're going to be exposed to all kinds of music and ideas and interesting people, and they're going to necessarily affect who you are personally and artistically. So in looking backwards from this perspective, it all makes sense to me. My poor record company just never knew when I put out an album what bin to put it in. Is this bluegrass? Is this rock and roll? Is this kids music? Is this political music? What? But it enabled me to really flaunt my musical schizophrenia. You know, I was just interested in everything. And what am I doing right now? I'm writing a mass. I'm writing an entire album based on Rilke's Book of Hours. I've got a Pete Seeger 100th birthday album I'm working on, and that's just the next 3. If you can continually feed your curiosity, you can have a wonderful, lifelong affair with this music. And luckily, if you plan well, as you get older, going out and getting paid top dollar for doing that gig is not that interesting. I mean, when I start collecting my union pension, I'm going to go back and play all the places that hired me when no one else would, that I haven't been able to afford to play in for 40 years. Or my buddy Charlie King came up with a great idea. Here's my fee, and if you fill the hall, I'll play for half that fee. You won't make as much money, but you'll pay to full houses for the rest of your career. And isn't it more fun to play for a full house than to get paid top dollar? At some point, you got to figure out, what's your currency value here? What currency do you really care about? Is it doing work that you're proud of? Is it getting the most money you can? Is it whatever. There's no right or wrong answer, and everybody will have a different answer. And that's what you get to do by lasting. And all the things we've talked about are those things that will help you last.
Both big and small. We have just a few minutes for questions. Does anyone?
So looking back on those 45 years of performing and recording and writing, can you tell us what your systems are, if you have any, for curating, for archiving your personal history? Do you know? Can you tell us where you were on 1997 in September? Were there anything memorable about that gig? And how do you record ideas for the next story? How do you keep your own personal archive?
Well, speaking for me, one of the things I learned from Woody Guthrie is that he dated and put the place of everything he ever wrote. So I have done that my entire career. I have a file that is filled with napkins and little scraps of paper and airline barf bags, which are not made of paper anymore, I will tell you, with little notes for songs. And sometimes songwriting is a jigsaw puzzle. You go back and you find these little pieces and you say, oh, I didn't realize that this went with this. But I have, my method is everything starts with a paper and pencil or pen.
And you've gone digital?
That's the second step. I can't sit down at a computer and write a song. It's just me. And so I have files. I have files of the early incarnations of songs and gradual work in progress things. And my poor, it's going to take a cryptologist to read all this stuff, but not that anyone would want to. But for my own, I pulled out the original first draft of Christmas in the Trenches the other day. And I thought, wow, this was actually pretty almost there.
Plus, you could eBay it.
You could say this is the original, but actually, I've never kept a scrapbook, but every now and again I'll find something that it's like, oh, this feels significant. I ought to keep it.
I was just going to say, I don't know that any of us go into archiving our life, but I do have 45 years of archives of all the work I've done in my basement.
Good for you.
And this summer, I'm going to start to, talk with the Library of Congress or UNC. There's one in North Carolina in Raleigh. There's one in South Carolina. But I think that it's a personal style, what you want to keep up with. I'm a saver, apparently. So I do have my high school coffee house records of who played and running the kitchen and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it's just very individual. But I do like your idea of dating stuff. Any other questions?
Just following up on something you said about having full houses versus getting a certain amount of money. I sort of missed how you said something about that. I thought that was...
It came from an idea from Charlie King, who said that he was going to do it. He never did do it, but I think it's a great idea of saying to a promoter, here is my fee. But if you, and of course it depends on what your fee is,
right.
But if you fill the house, I will play for half that fee. Now understand, that doesn't mean they have to have paying customers.
Right.
I mean, Harold Leventhal, you all know who Harold Leventhal was? He was Pete Seeger's manager, Arlo Guthrie's manager, and when Arlo first went out, Harold would call the venue that Arlo was going to be playing in every single day, and then the day before, he would buy up every last ticket and give them away. So the rap on Arlo was he sold out every show. So that's management. So you better get your tickets to see Arlo. So you know, if I was playing at Warren Wilson College and I said to Jim McGill, you know, I would love to come, I will do a benefit concert for the Swannanoa Gathering. And my fee is X number of dollars, but if you fill the hall, I will do it for half that fee. You don't think that they're gonna,
Do their promotion and publicity. and
you
fill the
don't think
hall.
that they're gonna paper that hall? You know, they're gonna work hard to sell, and every last seat that's empty, they're gonna put blow-up dolls.
But
Not that Jim has blow-up dolls.
oh, you just revealed the secret. But the thing is,
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
and you would make money. You would make more money, not maybe from your guarantee, but from sales and things like that, and mailing lists. So there's a trade-off.
And the wrap that you always sell out.
And as a concert promoter, I've taken a page from that book, and I have done that. And it was actually, Harold was backing me in a concert with the Woody Guthrie Archives, and we had tickets left over, and I had a choir singing, and so we went to all the parents, and we filled it up, and then everyone thought the concert sold out, and it's a perceptual value. So, any other questions?
Sort of just a quick point building on the back of that, one of the things that's really good for you to know is what your audience is in a given place. I played lots of places where somebody says, we got the Civic Auditorium. So 500 people show up in a 1,500 seat auditorium.
And can I tell you,
I'd rather play for 200 people in a 200 seat room than 500 people in a 1,500 seat auditorium, because everybody just feels weird. So if you have the opportunity to direct someone, don't let your ego get in the way. You know, because your ego at the end of the night is going to depend on what that buzz was. How much fun was this? Ooh, look at, we're all crammed in here. Weren't we lucky to get in?
And I was out on the road where that actually happened. They said, ooh, we have the civil auditorium. Someone was concerned about their ego. There was no way to fill it. Everyone sat on the floor. There was about 300 people. That damages your reputation. So you do have to be realistic when you're booking your own gigs, getting it back to that you're not trying to get into a hall that you can't come anywhere close to filling. You want to kind of get an idea of what's realistic for you. Okay, anything else? One more question? Everyone's in it for the long haul, John.
Wow, we were so complete, there's no questions.
Thank you so much.